Good morning. Welcome to the Superintendent's Community Update for Friday, February 11th, 2022. Sorry it's a couple minutes late today. Everything on my laptop signed me out and it was very slow starting back up today, so I apologize for that. I want to start with positive news and shout outs. First, I omitted doing this last week, and I know we talked about this at the board level, but really happy that and excited to announce that our Baltimore-Whitehall School Board of Directors have been chosen for the Richard Wynn Distinguished School Board Award. And so basically the Tri-State Area School Study Council out of the University of Pittsburgh does this recognition program. It's named for Richard Wynn. He really advocated a win-win solution for school boards and working with basically issues that are confronting school boards and how you work through that, the business of running a district. And I know that the last 2 years, and here we are, nearing the 2-year anniversary of what we've been dealing with the pandemic and COVID and everything else. That's pretty much the longest any issue has ever lasted that confronts a school board. Think about the normal things that a school board works through, whether it's hiring and firing, budgets. Those things have life cycles that are considerably shorter. You think about a budget cycle, even in situations where taxes have to be raised and so forth. Yes, that's never a pleasant thing, and I'm not minimizing that, but usually that means that a few folks will show up in the spring around budget time, and that's usually about the end of that. Provided that, of course, budgets are put together solidly and expenses are really geared towards what kids are, children programming and activity and so forth. In the Baltimore-Whitehall area, our residents have been very, very supportive of the local tax rate, and I think the tax rate is very manageable. And it is very much in line with where our communities are. But you think about most boards, it's very challenging. But this topic has gone on much longer, and so I'm just very happy with the work that they've done and continue to do on all topics. And I know COVID's the one that gets most of the headlines now, and how schools respond to it, but there's so much more that they face every single month. So on March 3rd, we get a chance to recognize the board at the Tri-State Distinguished Educator Banquet. I received an update and a positive shout in regard to our Baltimore-Whitehall School District Cyber Academy. And the parent had written in that they really wanted to compliment Mrs. Bilby, Mrs. Bilby being the teacher of this parent's particular children, 2 kids. And so talking about the excellent job for her 5th grader and her 4th grader. Don't even know where to begin because there's not one particular area of her teaching, but the teaching availability, organization skills, nothing has really failed the kids. It has and continues to be so positive. She's connected to the students for conversations, for friendships, to help one another, and the parents just could not be happier. And both girls are doing very, very well academically, and the teacher, Mrs. Bilby, makes sure that they understand their assignments and lessons before moving on. And I really appreciate this comment because it's not all roses and butterflies. And the parent brings up some of the concerns in regard to the Cyber Academy as we're working through this for the first year and our first opportunity really running our own program. Some of the drawbacks really have nothing to do with the educational piece, but it's the other part, the social piece and the other extracurricular types of things. An example about communication, about things around like 5th grade graduation or the 5th grade recognition, some of the lessons in regard to the musical lessons, the specials like art, gym, music, and so forth, and how we've been able to manage those because it's not the same. And so there are some areas that we want to do better, but this writer had really just wanted to wrap up by saying that there's really not enough information being told about the success of the cyber program. I know we've talked about having it, but maybe we've not been talking enough about the successes of it. So I know we have about 130 students, give or take, that are in the program. And this particular writer wanted just to thank the district for offering the cyber program and has given their family less worries through a difficult time in their lives. And so I appreciate that. Just update, I got one of the questions that came up today or last night, um, and I won't use the person's name because she asked me not to, but they were wondering how stressed I am. As all eyes were on me the other day as I was pulling out of the Harrison parking spaces during the morning drop off. Yes, thank you to the driver of the orangish colored Nissan pickup. I did not hit you. Um, but the vision continued. My vision issues continue. I did not, as I walked out. It's tough with the glare coming out of the building, and of course all the glare on the windshields, and so I may have looked stressed, or just the fact that it's just really hard to see. I mean, pretty much I'm rendered sightless in my right eye. Hopefully it continues to improve and vision increases, but it is stressful just in and of itself with that, let alone all the other topics that we're dealing with. I had the opportunity to spend some time at Harrison, just reviewing and talking with the principal about a variety of things that she's working through. And a couple of those questions came up even today. But thank you for your support. Yeah, it is a stressful time, just as I mentioned with the school board. Um, you know, February and March is is really the time of every school year that really the whole issues of cabin fever, kids, teachers, staff are just so anticipating spring and moving forward with all the excitement of what spring brings. And winter gets a little bit old this time of year. And so I want to thank the person for their comments. It's a bit of a joke. Is stay away from us. We don't need a traffic jam. Yeah, stay away. But I don't need to be run over either. Yeah, probably a good point. Um, I also wanted to talk about last night with the Me and We PTO. Excuse me, the science fair last night. What an incredible opportunity! I did have the chance to be there very much near the end of the event, so I know maybe I missed a lot of the kids' presentations. And as I walk through, and again, especially later in the day, it does get harder and harder to see. And so if there was the appearance that I may have ignored anyone, I do apologize. It's just, especially with the in large crowds, and it's just really tough to see all of the detail, at least especially if you're on my right side. But boy, what a fantastic night last night. The kids presenting. I had a chance to see two youngsters' presentations right here in the hallway outside of the administration offices. One about the formation of crystals, and boy, the detail and the depth of that young lady and how she explained what her project was and why the project was what it was. And then the other young man who explained the impact of sugar on essentially calcium in your teeth, and he used eggs and the impact on the shells of eggs to do so. Um, Again, it's not just putting up a board and say, okay, here's my project, and what normally you can read into that is someone else did the project, mom or dad helped to such a significant degree, and the kids don't know what the project actually was or what the meaning was behind it. That was not the case last night. The few youngsters that I had a chance to ask and explain, excuse me, their projects were just incredible in the amount of detail that they were able to give. The what and the why and the how was just incredible. And then I do want to wrap up again from positives and accolades. In a conversation I had with a parent on my way out of the building, and not to use the parent by name because I don't want to do that. But it's someone who we've not been on the same side of a lot of issues lately. We've exchanged a handful of emails and some different phone calls, and some of those have been difficult conversations, at least challenging, at least on topics. But we've always been able to walk away from those conversations between me and this gentleman, just in a place where it's okay, where we've been okay, and it leaves us the opportunity to come back to the next conversation. That was the case last night, and so it was first time I've actually probably had a chance to meet this person in person, at least to what I recall. The conversation started with a handshake, ended with a handshake, and really me checking up on him and him checking in on me, and I really appreciate that. The person who knows who they are, and again, they know that we've been on the opposite sides of a handful of issues, and really what I've always asked for is just the opportunity for that discourse. And the questions today actually are really great questions, and that discourse I think really can play out a little bit later as I go through some of the questions. Okay, moving on. Weather closures and delays. It made me think today, and as I was driving in, had a little episode of like Flashback Fridays, and you think about what we do now for cancellations and closures and shifting to delays, or I'm sorry, shifting to remote. Um, let's think back, and my wife and I were talking about this a couple days ago as well. When we were kids, there was three of us, myself and my two brothers, all in one bedroom. Of course, that probably never happens now either. But we basically, it was like the army style with all bunk beds in our room. And I would get up in the morning, flip the old radio on the stereo, and turn to 1020 KDKA with John Cigna. And our luck always was, as soon as we flip it on and we'd start to hear the closures, they'd be on like Bethel or Brentwood. We missed it. So you got to wait for the whole cycle to go through. Or when we were in elementary school, we were St. Albert kids. And so we'd flip it on, and there were like 47 Catholic schools in the Pittsburgh Diocese at that point. And so they'd be talking about St. Bartholomew or someone like that. And we'd think, oh my gosh, we just missed it. So all the way back through. Or you'd doze off before you'd hit the B's or the St. Albert, the A's again, and for the Catholic schools. And you'd be listening to that all morning long. And then if it was a delay, then you'd be sitting there an hour or so later trying to listen to see if your school came back up for a closure. The present day, I bet you there's no less than 10 ways that we present the information for folks from Twitter, social media. Of course, now TVs have the rolling scrolls. You can go on the websites, or we put it right in your pocket, right in your inbox for everyone to receive. I guess my flashback is I question whether we've actually made progress at all, or have we regressed. Maybe in our practices we've progressed, but sometimes in our expectations, especially when we think about in light of the complaints that we get about delays or how it's pushed out or what time of day it's pushed out, maybe we've regressed in our expectations. But it made me just think, the old days of John Cigna and going through all of that. COVID in our schools update again. It's another week of really good numbers. They're flat. I mean, there's not improvements this week, but probably maybe no news is good news. Could that be an answer? Last week I was talking to you about 10 student cases. This week we're talking about 9 student cases. So essentially no change. But most of those cases, 7 of them are coming out of Whitehall. So while I was looking at that last week, continue to look at that this week. Is the number 7 a great concern of mine? No, I'm just looking as to where and why. Is it cafeteria? Is there something that we're doing? Is it community-based? But if it's not, is there something that we're doing in the school that we should be doing better? Again, not that 7 is a big number, but again, tracking that, looking at grade level, looking at areas of the building. Is there something that we're just missing the boat? And again, 2 staff cases to make up our 9. Allegheny County numbers also down. So they're only reporting the week that began on the 30th, essentially last week, and concluding last Friday. So the 5,700 number, the final number of last week ended up being 5,900. I reported 5,700 as of last Friday because that was the number at that time. It's down, at least as it was what was reported yesterday, as 3,200. So not quite half, but definitely moving in the right direction. And I know that if you're looking on any type of either whether it's social media or traditional media, giving reports that the numbers are way down everywhere else. Again, they're reporting that in other vehicles, in other mediums as well. The state data, and the other dashboard that I'm able to look at, it's called the early warning dashboard at the state level that the Pennsylvania Department of Health puts together. For the first time, I'm seeing significant differences there, where they're still tracking something like 6,000 cases for last week, where Allegheny County, for Allegheny County, but Allegheny County numbers are 3,200. So that I don't quite understand the reason for that. The positivity rate continues to drop. I think it's down to something like 22%. But actually, for the first time that I'm aware of, because many questions asked, like, what is the threshold? What's the number at the county level? And then, of course, we're going to talk a little bit about the local level. But the first time that I'm aware of, excuse me, there are new Allegheny County number thresholds for when designations would change. We know that in the past, the idea of moving from high substantial down to moderate was in that 100 cases per 100,000, or that 10% positivity rate. And unless I've been asleep at the switch, which I don't think I have, because I'm attending all of the sessions where these things are talked about. For the first time, I saw in the notes yesterday that there are new numbers. And so high substantial at the county level, these are county numbers, would be above 625 infections per week. So if their number is 3,200, they're talking about the number of 625 being that threshold for moving from high substantial down to moderate. Moderate would be between the 624 mark and down as low as 126. So 624 infections per week down to 126, because they've identified low community transmission being that of 125 cases per week or less, pretty much 17 cases a day. So I don't know what this week's data is. I'll look at that later today. Hopefully I'll be able to pull that out. Usually that comes off the state site, and my concern is that the state numbers for last week were different than what the county reported. I may not have good data to go off of. If we only went with Allegheny County thresholds for what the levels of community transmission would happen to be, the high substantial, which is where we are now, or to drop to moderate, we would be needing to get from 3,200 down to essentially 624. But remember, we wrote our plan differently than what most districts have. Many districts that still have these types of tiers in place, they wrote their plan strictly to look at Allegheny County numbers. So when county transmission rates drop to whatever those thresholds happen to be, to move from high substantial based upon county numbers down to moderate, or from moderate down to low, that's when the masking situation would change within their districts. I know, I've read all their plans. When we put our plan together, it was very different, and it was very intentionally different. We put our plan together to make sure that we could look at our local data, what's happening in the district. I just gave those numbers. It's at nine student cases and 2 staff cases. We are very optimistic about where we want to head. We're very optimistic about when we want to head there and go there. We're currently reviewing the court cases that are out there, and not that I want to sit back and wait till these court cases are resolved. So I think the timing of them is actually quite poor. So the Third Circuit is picking up the 2 cases that we've been hearing about. So Upper St. Clair and North Allegheny. Both of those districts went to masks optional, but then there was a challenge in relation to special education children or medically fragile children. And the results of those 2 individual cases were different. North Allegheny was ordered to put masks back on, where Upper St. Clair at that time was told was not ordered to put them back on. But then it went to Third Circuit. So now both of those districts, based upon the way their plans are written, are being required to put masks back on. And the Third Circuit's going to hear it. I think it's on March 24th. So why, a month or better than a month out from now, I can't speak to, but that's when it's scheduled to be heard at that level. We're also following and trying to get more information in regard to a case that's very, very similar that's out east, Perkimon Valley, which is right outside of Philadelphia. They've had the same thing happen to them, where within their health and safety plan, they called for, basically they've gone masks optional, but they've been ordered to put them back on. We know that our solicitor, the Weiss Burkhardt Kramer firm, they are the same solicitor that represents Upper St. Clair. So we want to look at what differences exist in the cases. Is our plan with the local data piece that was very intentional on my part and the board's part of putting in there, does that have a bearing on what this outcome may or may not be? So what makes their situations the same? What makes their situations different than where we are? I think that, if we are different, is that an opportunity to add to the narrative? Again, our local data continues to be strong, and in a good way. Continues to be strong. I do believe that we have done all of the right things to ensure the health and safety for all children, And I know many of the questions today, or the comments today, talk about parental choice and wanting parental choice. And I fully respect that, and I understand that. Of course, as I'm walking out the door today, Mrs. Lutz reminds me that responsibilities, we're looking at all 4,600 kids. So how do we keep all kids safe? And I think that that is a challenge, and maybe that is the stress level. Maybe that's why I can't see out of my right eye. Who knows? Um, who really does know? But we are looking hard at that. And I said to the parent last night, it is my goal to get masks off kids' faces at the earliest possible choice, at least the mandatory part. Um, as I walked the hallways last night at Whitehall and listened to the kids give their presentations, or their explanation of their projects, I get the impediment that the mask brings. Um, I understand it fully. So I'm looking today to continue to get some clarity. Looking today to continue to get some data as to where we stand. You know, I'm not sitting here satisfied or expecting to wait until we get from 3,200 at the county down to 625. In fact, we, as a district, we've never done that. Back last year at this time, when county and CDC recommendations were saying, hey, you've got to get to a certain level before you can move to in-person learning. We were in-person learning well before that. When some districts were still sitting out fully in remote learning because of those numbers, we were having great success in hybrid and in person, even when we went to 4 day of instruction. And that's just about a year ago when we were almost fully rolled out in 4 day a week instruction for all students who wanted to have it. And so more information to come, maybe even more information earlier than next Friday. But I think things are definitely moving in an area that the district and myself is very, very supportive of. There was a question, so I'm going to pull the question about school field trips up into a topic to talk about now before we actually get to questions. And the question that the one parent had brought up, and it's actually been something we've talked about at length at the administrative level in regard to school field trips, and that why are we not doing full school field trips this year? Is it transportation based? If it is, could the schools and the PTAs hire private bus companies potentially to do those? Part of what the challenge is the middle of the day, when after students are in school and then before we start the dismissal procedures, we have buses available, and that's not the availability of drivers and buses is not the problem. The challenge that we're having this year, and I think everyone does remember this because you're living that schedule every day, is that the elementary schools, especially the two larger schools, are starting a little bit later than normal. So while we normally would have had all elementary in school by about 9 o'clock, all the children in school by about 9 in previous years, this year, in fact last year as well, but this year, I know McAnally's on an earlier schedule due to transportation, but the two larger schools, they're not in until about 9:30, even 9:35. And so we're a half an hour later of having children in. At the high school, we're beginning dismissal about a half an hour earlier. And all those things are transportation related to ensure that we have enough time to accommodate those double runs in and out of our schools. The impact of that is this. In normal times, our window for field trips would have been roughly 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. So field trips can't go out any earlier than 9, which makes sense. That's when kids would normally be in the building, especially at the elementary level. And then all buses have to be back and ready for their afternoon runs, which would have been by 2 o'clock because we would have dismissed about 2:20 or 2:25. Now that window is an hour shorter. And so the challenge that we're having is thinking about some of the destinations that are really popular for the schools, the zoo, some places in town, whether that's theater or athletic venues and so forth. Places like that are generally 40-minute transit to a place like that, a 40-minute back. So let's say an hour to an hour and a half transit time to and from the venue. If you have to feed the children lunch while you're there, actually exploring anything might be less than an hour or so. I'm not saying there's not great opportunity, or at least from, learning from the experience, and they are fun things to do. But what we've challenged the principal, especially at the elementary level, where this is more of a relevant topic, is, are there places within the community that we can go to? Of course, we know coming up in the spring, fifth grade pool parties, and I will have to address the fact that there's no Whitehall pool right now. But fifth grade pool parties and other types of rite of passage events, other things that can we do that are a lot closer than traveling and dealing with traffic in and out of town, or getting over to Highland Park and so forth. But we've not closed the door on those things, but it's just there's more challenging conditions. It's not simply lack of drivers. It's just that window of time is just different. The school calendars. Remember, last week I did push the school calendar out to everyone via a short form. All of the questions on the form are optional, and you don't have to answer any of them. You're more than happy to. I'd be more than happy if you answered all of them. And we devised only one calendar this year, not two. There was one change, and there was an error actually on the template that we used for the calendar. May 31st was omitted, and that's my error. Just as I started looking at the dates, I wasn't looking at the days on the page being the correct days. I actually started looking at the things that we put on there, like the days off and so forth. So May 31st was omitted, but that did not change the last day of school. So the last day of school is still that second Thursday. It's June 8th now, not June 9th. But essentially the calendar is 100% correct all the way up through the end of June. The end of May, just with the dates on the page being moved by one, but the last day of school is still set for that second Thursday in June. Again, no scheduled remote days. The winter break, December 23rd until January 1st, with that extra day, January 2nd, being pushed to the spring break. Seems like so far there's a lot of positive feedback around that, giving the kids a break around Easter, a little bit more, a dedicated break, especially if we're not using scheduled snow days in that manner. If we do have snow days or weather-related days, then that's the place where we would shift to remote. We have that March extra day, trying to avoid that big long haul through February and into March. There's half days before November, and then also the last day. There was questions around why couldn't we add more half days, like that half day before we start with the spring break, half day before we start the winter break, Christmas break. We'll continue to look at those things, but we also, anytime we have a scheduled half day, we have to meet 180 days of school, and at the secondary level, we need to hit the 990 hours within the school year. And anytime you have scheduled days off like that, where if it's a half day of school, the half day counts as the 108 in the 180, but we don't get the full bang for our bucket towards the 990. And we need to make sure we hit both of those thresholds. And so being a little conservative with those days, making sure that we can hit both of those requirements is important. And also half days are just challenging for the garage. I know that, and again, you look at the cost benefit. The benefit on a half day for that last day of school is huge. And so we do anything we can to make sure that one will work, especially even before Thanksgiving, since so many people travel. But they are hard to pull off because of just the transportation schedule. But please continue to answer those the survey, give me your feedback, and we'll push that whole process to the board for March. The cafeteria update, I'm not going to go through it page by page, but there were two questions last week in regard to how many hot entrees are off. The meatless, it was meatless Mondays, that's what it was. It was a meatless Monday question about how many meatless entrees that we offer. And so Mrs. Weber provided me some feedback in regard to the hot entrees that are meatless, as well as cold entrees that are meatless. And so that information is there for you in the notes. Excuse me. And the other question came in and around the quality of some of the fruit in regard to specifically apple slices and so forth. And that answer is there as well, that all those materials come from a processor, similar like what you get, like the bag snacks from like the McDonald's, if you get the apple slices there. So you can take a look at that information for you. I won't go through that page by page with you. Kindergarten registration, we're basically in the throes of that process. Right in the next few weeks, February 22nd, the online registration portal will be opening. And then there's also the opportunity to do that in person. There will still be required screening dates. All of that will be in the notes, and it's also available on our website. And I've seen posters in and around the schools with that information on them. So please be on the lookout for kindergarten registration, and please let those around you know, if you have neighbors, family members, and so forth that may not have children in school yet. They may not be thinking about this date just yet. So please, the earlier we know who's coming to us, all that has impact on our staffing. We start that staffing process within the next couple of weeks to understand what our needs will be for next year. And kindergarten is always a challenge because we get registrations will start in February and they last all the way up to and through the first few days of school. And that makes it very difficult to balance class lists and to do that well. Just a couple updates. Curriculum at Baldwin High School was just this past week. It was well attended compared to last year's. Of course, I think that it should have been and would have been. Faculty shared information about their courses. Student officers shared information about clubs and activities. Military recruiters, representatives from Steel Center were in attendance, and then also information about the new high school graduation requirements that will impact the kids next year, the class of 2023. So if you weren't able to attend, the sessions were recorded, so maybe there's a positive coming out of COVID. We're much more comfortable with doing things via video and recording that. So check out the recordings of the presentations on the news page of the Baldwin High School website. An announcement from our Employee Services Department. Baldwin High School is critically looking for and critically short of student lifeguards to work, especially our recreational swim hours, as well as the parties that we want to try to get back to at the pool. Our Baldwin High School pool has been a great destination and a great venue for birthday parties over the years, and it's pretty much inexpensive when you compare it to the likes of Chuck E. Cheese and some of these other venues. But we don't have the staff to pull it off, and we need lifeguards to do that. So if you are or know of someone that's certified, please reach out to Rachel Sprouse or the high school athletic office, and they can let you know what all the requirements, clearances, and so forth would happen to be. So getting into the questions, there were a lot this week, and I think it's great. Many of them are on the same topic, and so to summarize those, basically, now that the numbers that COVID numbers across the region continue to drop, when can we switch that optional masking? I think that's something that, again, I answered very specifically in my comments a little bit earlier. Knowing what the county numbers happen to be, not being happy with, and not waiting for a county number to drop as low as 624. Really looking to see, getting a couple answers from the legal front, what that may turn into. And I'm okay with if we need to push the envelope a little bit as well, but I want to know what the battle will be, or at least the best that I can understand what the battle might be if we go down that road. What I don't want to do is then be in a situation where we're putting masks back on. If we make a decision and then we're lumped into other cases, which we may not be able to avoid, but if we can predict it, then why just find out what information we need. And if we can't predict what the challenges are, then let's make sure we plan accordingly for them. Just trying to look at all the other, if there are any pieces of that missing. They're asking what the barometers were. Again, I gave the barometers of each level, what the county is pushing forward. People keep asking what my barometers, what my number happens to be, and I said I'm not putting a magical number on that. And maybe the magic. I guess that if there was a number, is that making the decision with the head being very logical, or is it somewhat looking for the trends, or if there's something different than just a number? If I said that the number that I'm looking for is 15, 20, 2, 5, then that's, to me, it's random. What does the number 625 from the county mean? To me, that seems awful random. And why 125 for low? What I'm looking at is what's happening within our schools, and I'm telling you, our school numbers are really, really great. And so I feel really good about moving forward with where we can be and when we can be there. I just need these couple other questions in my head answered, and I told you what those questions are. Question about wearing masks at the Snowball dance. I should have looked at the date of that. Um, when the Snowball dance is being held, any school rules that are being implemented at that time need to be followed. And so, if the event is inside, and and I honestly don't know the answer, I would guess at the end that it is inside, um, even though the fall dance, the homecoming dance, was outside in the parking lot, but it's a lot colder now than it was then. Any of the school rules in place at that point would have to be followed. But I can follow up on that a little bit more. Question about additional therapists available to children, that Mercy Behavior has cut some times down, and it's really because of staffing. Um, Miss Gallagher has been looking at this and having some conversations with me and looking at additional vendors. We know that system wide, that places like this or groups like this, Mercy Behavior, which is a contracted vendor of the district for this particular service, they're having staffing issues. I'm not sure that there's any area or field, whether it's behavioral issues or stonemasons over at the building, that are not having staffing issues and everything in between. But we are looking at additional services, additional places. We are aware of this, and I think everyone's having a tough time meeting the needs that are coming up, and that has nothing to do with Ball and Whitehall, but we fall right into the same pattern. There was a question about bus pickup, and that was on Wednesday, and this really was a Harrison Education Center question or concern, and that was one of the matters that Mrs. Wessel and I were talking about just the other day when I came out, and of course everyone noticed it when I came out. There was a problem. We had a driver that followed the route but was significantly behind. A couple wrong turns, taking paths because the previous routes that this particular bus or the runs that this bus has in the afternoon, because we transport children from up to 10 miles outside of our borders, and so this particular bus, before it gets to Harrison, does have some runs like that where it's in the city, coming through basically Route 51 and some of that traffic down in and around the city, and then even to get from that place to the school, chose a bad route. Instead of coming up 51, the driver went a different route, still coming towards the school, but had to deal with a lot of additional traffic. There were some missteps in the process as far as getting communication out to the families. The school has recognized those, and I believe Mrs. Wessel, as of my conversation yesterday morning, was putting out an apology for that. There was some question that the staff that all of the staff went home. That is not correct. There were staff members that were still there up until when the bus did arrive to the school. It may not have been the same staff members that do bus duty, but then other staff members relieved them, and we were able to get. We had supervision all the way at the time when the kids were picked up. I'm just looking at the question to see if there's anything missing, and we don't doubt. I mean, it's our responsibility to make sure that the kids are supervised, that we communicate what we know when we know it, and there were some parts of that that were not communicated clearly enough, and so we accept that. So it is the last line. I hope this is being looked into and it's handled differently if it happens again. It's exactly correct. There were 2 or 3 questions in regard about the district's purchase of the N95 masks for students. Let me be clear about that. We were able to obtain the KN95 masks from the Allegheny Intermediate Unit. In fact, they were just picked up yesterday. We're looking at where we may be in the next couple of weeks in regard to masking, and where we may want to use those. If students make requests to have those, and I know that they're not, they're disposable for that matter. I know there's different studies out there that talk about being able to reuse them and use one and then put it in the dryer or something. I don't even know if I read that much about that, because I don't know if I agree with all of that. Because then the other comment and question goes on about how many we'd have to use and purchase if we had them and they were basically disposable each day. And some of those numbers are correct. I mean, it would be a significant amount of money if that was the expectation, that we continue masking and the mask has to be a KN95. That is a big number. I'm not aware of any other district that has provided the KN95 for every student who is and when they are still masking, because it is a big number. But I did take advantage of the masks that were available to us at no cost to the Baldwin-Whitehall School District, and we're making plans on how we can distribute those, whether that's staff in potentially higher risk areas, whether that would be students that are of higher risk that are requesting those. And I think there were some questions. Part of the questions about, am I going to mandate that children wear those masks? No, that is not the intent of obtaining those. It was obtaining them because they were available, and if they can be of resource to the district, then it would be silly for me not to take advantage of that, especially at no cost to us. Question in around schools having space for things like assemblies or group performances and things of that nature. We also know that as we've been working through many of our mitigation strategies, that lunches are not all being held in the cafeterias. We're using cafeterias, we're using auditoriums. Auditoriums are set up with tables and essentially are cafeteria style, even gymnasiums for that matter. Whitehall Gym, McAnulty Gym, but then at Harrison it is the auditorium. As we continue to move through this year and as we get into next school year, we want to continue to roll those things back to. My goal is having kids eating lunch in the cafeterias, having our gyms available for a full gym class, phys ed class where they can use the whole gym, having our facilities available for evening opportunities for permitted groups, whether that's our youth basketball groups within the community, or even for revenue generating opportunities where outside groups want to rent our gyms to utilize those spaces. We just can't do that now because they're set up, and we just simply don't have the manpower to tear those down and set them back up on a daily basis. And so, just like last night, where McAnulty and Whitehall planned in a very, very fantastic way the science fair, and they did that following the health and safety plan. There's no reason why we can't be doing some of those things. There's just a lot of different challenges about that. It's just not as simple as it was before. More questions in regard to the threshold, which I've given answers on that. More questions about the threshold, and they're all essentially all the same, just written differently. There's a question about whether the Baldwin-Whitehall School District has a debate club, and if I'd be willing to debate masking. I've never shied away from any of those opportunities, whether being interviewed by the Perbolite, and Perbolite reporters have been just fantastic, and I've made myself available to them at every request that they've had, or other groups that want to have that conversation or debate for that matter, and not even limiting it to the debate club. But yes, I would be more than happy to have that conversation, and have already been having that conversation. Another question about Whitehall being assigned seats at lunch beginning of the year. Again, same thing. Our goal was really to get the restrictions in the lunchroom, but to move back on those. But like I've said before, trying to do one variable at a time. So we are not contact tracing and quarantining, and we were about 3 weeks into that. Our next decision that I really want to tackle hard is the masking piece. And if some of these things like lunchroom have to stay in place, then so be it. But I do want to move those things back, with as soon as possible and as safely as possible. Getting away from COVID, addressing the increased security presence at Baldwin High School and the number of additional officers. Is this increased presence in response to anything specific and emerging, or a deterrence for further problems? Excuse me. First of all, the district has not employed additional officers. We have 2 school police officers, and then we also have security. But I do know that just continued conversation with the 2 police chiefs at Baldwin and Baldwin and Whitehall Borough. Baldwin Township is part of those conversations as well. But they don't have any schools within. There are no schools within the township. There's an open door for the officers to come in, and we encourage it, and the chiefs encourage that. So just as I was preparing my notes for this morning, I saw that a Whitehall car did their rounds around this building. Excuse me. So we encourage it. We want it. I've said that, please come in. The lunchrooms are open. The hallways are open. Come in, stroll, and there's a variety of reasons for that. Number one, both departments have had a lot of officer turnover. While in the past, the more experienced officers, they have known the inside of our buildings. So when they would get a call, hopefully we don't have to, but if they get a call and say, hey, they're having a problem at the high school at the auditorium entrance, or within the auditorium, or the hallway, the math hallway, third floor, whatever. A lot of the previous officers knew exactly what the inside of those buildings looked like, so they had the context for those types of calls and that type of location. The newer officers don't, because they're just simply, they don't have the experience in the district and in the community. So part of that, the method to that madness is to make sure that the officers are walking the buildings. They're familiar with how the buildings are constructed, laid out, how classrooms are set up. And so that way, in the event that we do have a problem, that they're not coming into that blind, so to speak. And the other part of that is just simply the rapport with kids. Due to staffing matters, Whitehall Borough has not been able to continue as aggressively with their DARE program, and we do have the intent and the hope to reestablish that. And so we've had Officer Dave and Officer Bruce and other folks that have really been part of that school community to such a higher degree on a more consistent basis. But again, we want those officers in the buildings, and so we're not in response to anything specific. When we do have problems, and if it is a violation of the crimes code, we call the police, and we're not going to be shy about that, regardless of what any safe school report may or may not say about us. When kids come to the building, when kids come to the school, it's our responsibility to make sure that they're safe and they stay safe. And if there's others that are not consistent with that thinking, then we'll do what we need to do and move forward. More questions around the KN95 masks, about the cost. I addressed that as well. I think that just about wraps up those questions. Some of these questions that were put together, I know that there's been other communications that will be coming out of my office to address some of these things, and so I can communicate directly with the folks that sent those questions in. So I know it's an exciting weekend this weekend. We've got Valentine's Day on Monday, and so we have that. We have, of course, Super Bowl Sunday. As a Pitt guy, I'm looking forward to having the two Pitt alumni in the game. Of course, rooting interest has to be for LA for me, not for Cincinnati, but that's a whole other topic. So until next time, please continue to be safe, stay warm. I think the weather today is going to be great, but it's going to be a little colder this weekend. And then again, continue to be kind and show some grace to one another. Thank you and have a great week.